Okay, good morning, ladies and gentlemen. Welcome to our session on the potential of renewable energy in Africa. And it's apropos to have this session on Energy Day. So just to give a little background, when we talk about the developmental challenges that face the African continent, energy access has to be on the top of the list. And the African continent, it accounts for 17% of the world's population, but yet 6% of the world's energy supply. There are over 600 million people in Africa that have no access to electricity. That is almost twice the size of the population of the United States. And if we don't see a dramatic increase in safe and reliable energy for all, it'll be really difficult for Africa to realize their sustainable development goals, as well as the goals of the Africa 2063 agenda. There are over 930 million people in Africa that have no access to clean cooking fuels. And it's interesting to note that there are over 20 African countries that utilize renewable energy as their primary source of energy. There are 8 countries alone that generate over 90%. I'll just give a few examples. We have Central African Republic, Ethiopia, Eswatini, DRC, among others. So there is no doubt that the African continent has an enormous potential when it comes to renewable energy. And that is why we are gathered here today with a diverse panel. We have the president of the Arab Bank for Economic Development in Africa, BADEA, Dr. Sidi Waretta. We have Professor Carlos Lopez, who is the chairman of the Africa Climate Foundation at the University of Cape Town. And we have His Excellency, Mr. Alain Ipoussi, who is the Chief Executive Officer of Africa 50. So now I would like to start with Africa 50. Could you please share with us your experience on renewable energy, since you're focused on infrastructure projects? Thank you.
Yeah, well, thank you very much. Let me first start by thanking my brother, His Excellency Dr. Sidi Ulta from Badea, for inviting me to speak at this important event. Indeed, renewable energy is very important for us in Africa, as we seek to support the economic growth of the continent, and to do it in a way which is sustainable, and to adopt a low carbon path towards our development goals. We are also on the continent committed to meeting our climate target, and for that, renewable energy is quite important. So our experience at Africa 50, which is Africa 50 is an infrastructure investment platform which is owned by 31 African countries, the African Development Bank and 2 African central banks. Those shareholders, they have given us the mandate to operate commercially and to catalyze private investment in infrastructure in Africa, including in the energy space. So what I will be talking about briefly is essentially how private sector has been investing in renewable energy in Africa, and certainly saying also that we need to do a lot more and a lot more fast. And so at Africa 50, we've invested in a number of renewable energy projects. One of the biggest one in which we invested is a series of 6 solar projects totaling 400 megawatts in Egypt, in the Bemban Solar Park. We are an investor in this project, which is now delivering power, renewable power, to Egyptian population and businesses. We also invested in renewable energy in other countries. The majority of the portfolio of Africa 50, of power portfolio, the majority is in the renewable space. We include also hydro projects. But what I want to say is that we are pushing, indeed, even here at COP in our conversation, we are pushing for a balanced energy mix, which includes renewable energy, but also gas as a transition fuel, complementing renewable energy to support Africa's industrialization economic growth. Now, the main message that I like to convey is that our investments in renewable energy in Africa have been impactful and profitable. So the private sector has a big role to play. We are not seeing enough private investment in renewable energy in Africa, but I believe this is about to change. Right here at this COP28, we've seen a lot of activity from developers, including Africa 50, developers from the UAE and other countries, signing deals to trying to develop renewable energy in Africa in order to deliver renewable energy to population and businesses. So we see momentum, but what we are recommending at Africa 50 is that we have to focus a lot more on project preparation and project development so that we can build up the pipeline of bankable renewable energy projects that will then attract private investments from within Africa and outside Africa. For that, the African Development Bank, Africa 50, and the African Union Commission, I should have started with the African Union Commission because, of course, it's the African Union Commission which is leading us. So the African Union Commission, the African Development Bank, and Africa 50 joined with many partners, including Badea. We achieved a significant milestone for the Alliance for Green Infrastructure in Africa, which will be focusing on developing projects, pipeline of bankable projects, to make sure that we're able to attract a significant amount of private investment in energy, renewable energy in Africa. So this is the main message that I like to convey, that indeed renewable energy in Africa is an attractive investment. Of course, we need to make sure that we structure those investments correctly, but we know we have a track record, a good track record in structuring those investments. Now we need to scale up. We need to do a lot more. We need to multiply the amount of investment by several, I would say, maybe 10, 20, 40 times, maybe 50 times, because that is what is needed to bridge the gap. But the story is good. Now we need to speed up and scale up. Thank you.
Okay, thank you very much. So Mr. Alain here, he highlighted on the potential of the private sector when it comes to renewable energy, hence the climate change mitigation. And he also stressed on its partnership with Badia in taking things a step further with the Alliance for Green Infrastructure in Africa, because now we know that Africa 50 is specialized on infrastructure, but the Ajaya, it's more niche when it comes to particularly green infrastructure. So thank you for that. Now I'll move on to Professor Lopez. Please share with us your experience on the field. Thank you.
Thank you. You know, this week, the COP alliance of countries, not all countries, but I think 131, have signed the tripling of renewables until 2030. So this is very good news in terms of commitment, but unfortunately we have seen a flurry of pledges being announced in every meeting. So the issue is more implementation, and some of these proclamations are very good in political terms, but they have to be translated into something tangible. What is the real problem? We have two problems. One that is more domestic, meaning African, and the second that is more external to Africa, but Africa suffers from the consequences. The domestic difficulty is that we don't have enough attractiveness for this type of projects because of some regulatory impediments, the fact that we don't have enough capacity, And I remember having discussions with Dr. Ta about the need for de-risking investments in Africa. That includes, obviously, renewables. But what we had in mind when we had that discussion, it was about 5 years ago, it was more de-risking in terms of over-structuring of the investment projects. You know, it takes too long, it's very complex, because we are taking most of the risks through guarantees, and it's very complex, and it's very costly. So the average time that you will take to approve a project will be something like 5 years. If you get something in 3-4 years, you are a winner. So we need to basically put a lot of support for these investments to move much faster. So that's our domestic challenge. Now, we have an external challenge, that is the fact that we don't have enough investment going into renewables, despite all the talk. So if you look into what is the characteristics of investment today in Africa, or if you look into the last 5 years, you will see that the number one investment is actually going for fossil fuels. And number two is on IT, which is good news. But what does it tell us? It tells us that we have basically a huge amount of money that is going into renewables, but Africa is not the destination. So now we take about 5% of the total. And yet everybody recognizes that Africa has the largest potential on renewables. So how to explain this paradox? Again, the word that comes to mind is de-risking, but now is a different type of de-risking. We are talking about de-risking what is good for nature. It's because the normal or the business as usual is not good for nature. Otherwise, you wouldn't need de-risking. You would have the incentive. It means that the incentive mechanisms are not there to make investments on renewables in this case, or on anything related to transition, are still missing. And they are still missing because of a regulatory framework that the Africans don't control. Now it's no longer domestic, it's international. So if you have like the Bank of International Settlements, putting new rulings to make the banks more robust and resilient, the Basel III requirements. And those requirements are asking for all kinds of due diligence that are going to make investment much more complex, complicating again our structuring, de-risking. You end up with a situation where instead of having the banking system interested in Africa, they desert Africa. International banks are just leaving because the market is not attractive enough in size and scale to justify so much due diligence. The problem is that this due diligence is not related to climate. It's related to other things. But it shows us that it is possible through international regulations to insist on certain types of incentives. In this case, it was to fight politically exposed persons, to make sure that there is no illicit or tax evasion, all these kind of things, which is fine. But what about if we use the same approach to create incentives requiring from the banks that, for instance, they present their thresholds for net zero targets, that they are going to be certified in terms of, ability to operate if they correspond to certain climate-related targets and so on and so forth. This is missing. Because it's missing, there is no incentive. It's all volunteering. And that's why proclaiming renewable of energy investments, tripling it or whatever, remains volunteering. It's not constrained in terms of regulatory systems that are going to make it happen. Which then gives us an idea why, if it is so difficult for Africa already in terms of just meeting the normal due diligence, adding to that, other conditions like climate-related, make it not a non-attractive market. So then we get 5%. So we are not going to change that. So that's why institutions like Badea can make a difference, because they can create what everybody's talking about, which is blended finance, which is the opportunity to create the right incentives the other way around, which is by making sure that you capture most of the front costs, you front load the costs, and you make sure that it becomes attractive for the private sector to also come in. Obviously, this is not the preferred modality, but this is the one that is available, and this is the one that everybody's talking about. We are saying now that the World Bank, the IMF, all the international financial institutions should adjust to make blended finance more important, more attractive. And we even say that these institutions have to be fit for purpose, and the only way they can be fit for purpose is by making sure that this blended finance becomes their sort of rule of thumb, the number one way to turn around the difficulties that we have with climate finance. I mean, it's a bit sad to say that this is the only way, because the best way is the one I described, but it's not within reach, at least for the moment. But we should continue to insist on it. Otherwise, the turning around of lack of investment for renewables in Africa will continue for some time.
Okay, thank you very much for that valuable contribution. So the one thing that really caught my attention here is investment in renewables. That's why we're here, to discuss the potential of renewable energy in Africa. And it seems that that potential has yet to be realized. And it's interesting that you brought this on the playground of the financial institutions, because that's going to take me to the next question for His Excellency Dr. Sidi. So now you know that MDBs, they're talking about becoming Paris-aligned. And Badia, you have 2030 strategy. The infrastructure is the first pillar. So what does being Paris-aligned mean to Badia?
So I think for Badia as a multilateral development bank, but the bank also with a special focus on sub-Saharan Africa, this alignment is really an opportunity, but also it's a big challenge. It's an opportunity because we are going in the right direction, the direction in which the whole people are going, all multilateral development, but also even the private sector and all the players and stakeholders in the climate change world. But it's a big challenge for a bank for many reasons. I will focus on 3 reasons. The first reason is what have been already mentioned by Professor Carlos Lopez and by Alain Ebobisse on the issue of the lack of financing and the lack of attractiveness of investment in sub-Saharan Africa for international investors. And of course, the issue of de-risking, which the Professor Lopez has mentioned, and we discussed it 5 years back in different in a different fora and for different reasons. But still, there is a risk perception which is very high in Africa, and it makes risk premium very high too. The second point, which for me is also very important, is we can talk about Africa as one continent, but in fact we are facing different situation and different geographies, which has different type of problems and also different ways of greening their investment. So if we took, for instance, the electricity, we have countries with only 9% access to electricity, and countries like Morocco are almost at 100%. So we have also countries who are relying on renewable. DRC, for instance, more than 90% is coming from dams. While we have countries who are relying more than 90% on thermal. So we have countries with high potential for solar energy, Sahel, for instance, and the Maghreb. But we have also countries who can difficultly develop solar energy if we think about the equatorial countries. So we cannot have one solution for all African countries. So we have to take into consideration the different type of situation we are facing in Africa, and also the level of sophistication in the capital market in different regions. So for instance, East Africa is much advanced than the rest of the region in Africa. North Africa is also, some countries in North Africa are more advanced than other countries. So we have to take into consideration this situation, because we cannot devise a unique solution for African countries to tackle the issue of investing in green and renewable energies. Now everybody is also talking about hydrogen, green hydrogen. This is the new temptation. And as mentioned by Professor Lopez, a lot of pledges have been done, a lot of MOUs have been signed. But we have to remain, to keep our feet on earth and to look at the reality. And I see that Alain, who is in the heart of this fight, knows how difficult it is to close one single project, let alone there's billions or trillions people are talking about. So we have also some regulatory issues. In some countries, you don't have the legal and institutional framework which is needed to develop PPPs or to allow IPPs to develop. Besides that, we have the reality of the national utility companies. In most countries, utilities companies are in deficit, simply because they cannot raise the tariffs as they wish to do, and at the same time they have costs they have to cover, including financing costs. So this is making the life of investors in this electricity sector a little bit difficult, because at the end of the year, the taxpayer will cover the difference between what the consumer is paying and what the consumer was supposed to pay. So the role of MDBs can be seen at two levels. One is to try to bring all the stakeholders around the same table to discuss, because I think everybody is trying to get part of the cake, but nobody is really taking into consideration the role of other parties. So we need to have all the stakeholders around the same table, and to bargain and to negotiate and to agree on the way forward to be able to come up with consensus on how to structure investment, renewable investment in Africa. The second, we have to definitely to be realistic and to agree on just gradual transition, because in some countries it is very difficult from a practical point of view to develop the type of solution we are all trying to develop. And recently I was discussing with the Minister of Energy in one of the African countries, and his problem is very simple. Okay, I am ready to go for wind, I am ready to go for solar, but the network, the grid, my grid cannot support more than 20 mega or 30 mega. I need hundreds of megas. So this is a technical issue. Maybe we need to invest more in research and development to come up with solutions, or to develop regional networks to allow us to support this type of investment. But really, I think there is a big gap between what is in the international fora and what is on the ground.
Okay, thank you very much. So indeed, it all can be traced back to the institutional capacities of the countries, especially when it comes to renewable energy. And there's no doubt that if, at the grassroots, the capacity is strengthened, then the implementation will definitely be much easier. And for example, if we were to talk about nuclear energy, some might say it's a bit too early. So that's why, we'd have to look at the grid and then, do like a technical assessment on that. I will just ask one question. So you mentioned something, Mr. Alain, about having a combination of the energy mix, renewable with some gas. Are there any concerns that there might be some sort of deviation from the objective of the Paris Agreement of phasing down on fossil fuels?
Well, I'll come to that. Actually, let me address it right away. I think it's very clear, at least to me, and when I listen to many of our leaders, they make that case very strongly that we are pursuing as Africa a twin objective of meeting our climate target, but also supporting our urgent development needs. And so gas is now being recognized as a transition fuel, and even the Paris Agreement accepts the principle of differentiated path towards getting to the climate goals. So for us, many of our African leaders were making a forceful case. President Adesina of the African Development Bank, who's also the chairman of Africa 50, made a very passionate case about the need to have a balanced energy mix, including gas. Because let's face it, what would people prefer? To see those 900 million Africans that don't have access to clean cooking? They prefer them to burn charcoals and to cut woods, or to have lower carbon energy. So for me, it's very clear. And it's not only my position. I'm listening to our leaders, and we are advocating a pragmatic approach to getting to meet our climate target. Now, the very interesting point that were made by my brothers, co-panelists, Carlos and Dr. Sidi, on the reform of the MDBs as to where they should be focusing on a bit more. Look, I am totally in favor of some of the ideas which have been discussed, which is for them to focus a bit more on risk mitigation, and I'm also adding project preparation and project development. These are the hard stuff. These are the most difficult aspect. It's not enough just to lend money to countries that could reimburse you easily, because if you mitigate the risk, the private sector can come in and provide the financing. So I'm all for blended finance. I'm actually recommending that, but you also have to make a reform within those organizations so that they can implement things with speed and be user-friendly. It cannot be so complicated. It doesn't have, there's a sense of urgency that we don't see enough in the global forums. People come here, discuss, announce things, and then the implementation is not always the way it should be. That's why I am actually quite grateful for one of the announcements that was made in Nairobi at the Africa Climate Summit by the UAE. They announced a $4.5 billion climate financing initiative for Africa. The way they did it is one of the ways that I believe we should be doing things in the future, because they not only announced the $4.5 billion, they also presented the institutions that are responsible to achieving those targets: Masdar, AMEA Power, Abu Dhabi Fund, ETI Credit, and Africa 50. We are accountable for delivering on that initiative. If it doesn't work, it is us, because most of the time people announce things, you don't know who's accountable, and then nothing happens. Today, we are publicly accountable. We have to deliver, and I can tell you that we're already starting to deliver. 3 months after the announcement, we already signed a few deals, and we're starting the implementation. So that's one of the ways that people now, when they announce things, they should say how they will deliver on that. And one of the big ways, in my opinion, to deliver is to support a bit more project preparation and project development. We need a pipeline of bankable projects. Even the bank, Badea today, you have capital. You're trying to deploy it. One of the challenges is that where are the good projects where you will deploy the capital? I'm pretty sure if you bring a good project, well prepared, to Badea, they will finance it. Now, then the international community, the international investors, they're a bit more risk adverse. They may not come in. That's why you need to mitigate the risk for them to come in. Finally, I think we need to do a lot more work to try to mobilize our regional and domestic resources. It's not enough always to go and ask for money to global institutions. We have $2 trillion of assets under management by African institutional investors, sovereign wealth fund, pension funds. At Africa 50, what we are about to do, in 2-3 weeks, we will announce a major investment fund, mostly funded by African institutional investors. We did not first go to look for money globally. We went to African investors because they also have a different appreciation of the risk. They're more understanding of this gap between the perceived risk and the actual risk. I tell you something, and Dr. CD mentioned that. The perceived risk is much higher than the actual risk. I'm not saying that there's no risk, there's risk, but the perception is too high compared to the reality, as demonstrated by real studies by S&P. S&P did a study. Was it Moody's or S&P? I don't know. One of the big rating agencies, they did a study on the default rate for infrastructure project. Africa was number 2 in terms of the lowest rate, default rate, well ahead of Latin America, for example. And if you look at people today, they will tell you Latin America is less risky. But Moody's has a study that demonstrates that. So we also have to tell our story when we have success stories. But to finish, speed. We cannot spend 5 years, as you said, Carlos, designing projects, structuring it. We cannot. We don't have to be. Africa 50, in 6 years of operation, we've invested in 23 projects in 23 African countries, and we're making good money. It's true. Let's tell that story. So we can speed up without compromising the quality. Thank you.
Okay, thank you very much. We're actually running a bit short of time, so Professor Lopez, you have any concluding remarks? You have any message that you'd like to send to academic institutions? Please, in a minute or two. Thank you.
Well, this issue, I'm just going to build on Alain's intervention. This issue of what is the real priority for Africa, obviously our priority is not mitigation, right? So if we are in a situation where we emit about 3 to 4% of the world emissions, but in fact, if you take South Africa out of the rest of the continent, we are emitting for about 1.8%. The rest is South Africa, because of coal. So it's just you take out South Africa and, you know, it's even more striking. If that is the situation, and if the carbon sequestration absorptive capacity of the Congo Basin alone eliminates that deficit, I like to say, and I've been saying this since I arrived at this COP, we are the only region that is already net zero. No other region is net zero. We are net zero. So we have the moral ground. Nobody should tell us what to do because we are the only ones that are there. All the others are trying to get there. So they have to decarbonize. It's not our problem. You know, we of course want to invest on renewables. That's my message, because we want to position our technologies as latecomers with the best technological options, which happen to be low carbon. But it's not because we are being pushed to be on mitigation. It's because it's in our interest in terms of productive capacities adjusting to what the future is going to be. So that is the option. But for that option to work, we need financing. If the financing is going to fossil fuels, what can we do?
Okay, thank you. Now, Dr. Sidi, to wrap up, I'm just going to ask, you mentioned something about fossil fuels. So I'd like to get your perspective as a financial institution on the financing of fossil fuels. Thank you.
So thank you very much. So I think that Professor Lopez has just said what can be said on this topic. So Africa is not responsible for emission. Africa is the lowest continent in with carbon footprint, and Africa is going to renewable energy because of a conviction. It's about a conviction to go. So but yet Africa has needs. Some countries have very low access to electricity, and as mentioned by Alain, we need a transition, and we need a just transition for Africa. Thank you.
Okay, thank you very much. And with that, our session is concluded. So let's have a photo. Thank you.
Soil movement. He is a champion who fills stadiums and social media with messages about the importance of healthy soil and the importance of us caring for this very precious resource. Also with us is Her Excellency Baroness Scotland, who is the Secretary General of the Commonwealth. She is championing soil issues in her work, and latterly with the Living Lands Charter of the Commonwealth. And she's also, as we learned yesterday, a big supporter of women's land rights. So we look forward to hearing about how she engages in the soil issues. Last but not least is the Executive Secretary of the UN Convention to Combat Desertification, Mr. Ibrahim Chow, who has started very close to soil and farming issues in his native Mauritania and has since taken these issues to the United Nations Forum. Today, we're talking about soil being the climate superstar. But do we know really how much can we have this important resource helping us to move along the climate agenda, and whether or not this is really a superstar or more of a Cinderella? So to help us answer the question how we can make this star shine brighter, this is my first question to all of our speakers. Very briefly, how can we make sure that soil is recognized as a climate superstar? And starting with Baroness Scotland, if I may.
No, I thought I was going to be speaking after the guru. Well, what's absolutely clear is that we ourselves, you know what they say, from earth we came and from earth we will return. And so our soil is fundamentally important to everything we do. You'll know that the Commonwealth is made up of 56 countries. That's 2.5 billion people, 1/3 of our world, 60% of whom are under the age of 30. We understood that we had been ignoring the beauty of our earth, the importance of our soil, and the degradation of our soil was causing literally billions and then trillions of loss. If you look at the GDP of the world, about 91 trillion, it was devastating to understand that 40 trillion of the losses were due to our degradation of our soil. And the impact on our health and our well-being is extraordinary. So the question for all of us is, how should we refocus on our land? How do we recognize that our land really is the superstar which helps all of us to thrive? Because the 3 Rio conventions had done the most amazing job. But the question was, how was our countries implementing the advice, the support that the conventions were giving? And the truth is, many of our member states who are most in need of the technical expertise didn't have access to it. And many of us were faced with the fact that we had the political will in our countries, but not the opportunity to get the right information in terms of implementation. So I'm really glad that both my brothers are here. The great guru on the right, because I know he's going to tell us about the beauty of the soil, the nature of the soil, and the mechanics of how it works. And I am absolutely understanding my place, and I'm not going to steal any of his thunder because he's magic. And on my other side is my other brother, who I have 7 brothers, I told people, but I just picked up an 8th, because the work that you have been doing has been extraordinary. So my role was, how do we all come together? And what we've done is we've created the Living Lands Charter, which our 56 countries agreed in Kigali last year to implement. And as a result, the 3 Rio conventions and we are coming together to place that knowledge, that expertise into the hands of our member states so they can implement it. And my other partnership, of course, is going to be with Sadhguru because he has the magic. So we're putting the magic to turn soil into a superstar. And if any of you saw our guru on his motorbike going across the world, he has made soil cool. The purpose of the Living Lands Charter is to change the dial. We don't just need the science, the technology, and the know-how to help our communities, particularly our indigenous communities. We also need the money. So what the Commonwealth has done by creating the Commonwealth Climate Finance Access Hub is to get the money for our small and developing states. With just 7.8 million, which for many is just a rounding up figure, we have been able already to deliver into the hands of our member states $322 million with $500 million in the pipeline. But many of our states who would want to implement the advice given by Ibrahim and the advice given by Sadhguru don't have the money or the ability to do that. So just imagine where we would be if every country had a climate finance advisor and every country had the knowledge and expertise that we will give them through the Living Lands Charter, and every country then had an action plan to deliver it. So my main message here today is the Commonwealth should be your partner of choice, because if we can come up with the solutions for our 56 countries, we can come up with solutions for the whole world. And we can do this, but we need help. And I'm so glad to be sitting between two superstars who are going to deliver for the Commonwealth and for the world. So thank you.
Thank you very much, Baroness Scotland. Sadhguru, if I might turn to you to tell us more about that magic on how to make soil cool.
Well, namaskaram to all of you, Ibrahim, ma'am. Making soil cool is just the beginning. We have to cool the soil, that is the real thing. Now we're talking about the world getting hot, and it's okay. We are talking about the world getting hotter. What is really getting hot? Sun is hot as it should be. Land shouldn't be this hot, but it's getting hot. It is, for statistics and other scientific input, Ibrahim will take care of that. I don't want to venture into that right now. Because it's very important. Common people with their common sense should understand what is the problem. Great scientific data, economic data is not going to get across to common people, especially the people that she's talking about, these 56 nations, who are the biggest sufferers of this consequence. Land is getting hot, why? Simply because it's exposed. So every leaf, every extra leaf that we put on this planet is climate mitigation. One more step towards climate mitigation. Every extra leaf that we put is a positive step towards climate mitigation. But we are busy. I'm not making a irresponsible comment on this, but we're too busy trying to catch the carbon dioxide in the air or in the atmosphere. I am not saying that's not a challenge, I am not saying that's not a problem, it is a problem, it needs to be addressed, there's no question about that. But it's always when we come to global action, it's very important that… because when we think of global action, resource will always be a biggest challenge. Both human resource and financial resources will be the biggest challenge. When resource is a challenge, Where money produces maximum result, that's where we should do it first. Land and soil. With 1/10 of the money that's being spent right now on climate mitigation, we can turn this land and soil situation around in 8 to 12 years' time, if we go with the right kind of policies. When I say policies, I will make it very simplistic, because complexities are for academics and scientists to handle. People should understand in the simplest possible way how it affects their life. If people don't understand this, you can throw as much scientific jargon as you want, economic data as you want, it's not going to get across to people. So put it very, very simply. The number of people that we are on this planet is increasing. In the last century, we've gone up 4 times over. We do nothing about that. We think it's all right. It would be all right if you could also expand the planet. When I say the planet, I'm not just talking about the size of the planet. 82% of the insect population has vanished in the last 70 years. 92% of the freshwater aquatic life has disappeared in the last 70 years. Microbial life is vanishing at approximately 27,000 species per year. I'm saying we need to understand these are all the foundational life for who we are. That means we cannot live here without them, but they will thrive without us. This is not understood. And land is the place, land or soil is the place where it happens. Now, we have used land and soil in different ways. In the sense, if you excavate any ancient archaeological site, one thing that we always find is burnt clay, pottery. Either simple ones, rudimentary ones or exquisite ones, we find that that is the only way we know what people were doing. So this is what they were doing, that they took the soil and made a pot out of it. Pot is not a small thing. If you had no other container in your life, if you did not know how to hold water except taking it in your hands and drinking from the river or pond, a pot is bigger than a satellite or a supercomputer. Hello? A mud pot is bigger than anything because you could bring water into your home and keep it there. Otherwise, every time you wanted it, you had to go wherever it was. So they made pots out of it. Now we are making many things out of it, while the phones that you carry is made out of soil. No, I'm not saying you baked it in home, I'm just saying anything we have done has come from land. You can call it coal, you can call it oil, you can call it lithium, you can call it gold, you can call it whatever you want, it's all land. We need to identify this, that every resource, just about every resource we are using, no matter what we are making out of it, is all land. So land is not just the farmer's business, land is everybody's business, because we are land. The only question is, will we get it now or will we get it only from the maggots when we are buried? This is the only choice we have. If we get it now, we can make a difference. If we get it too late, we make good manure, of course. So, the important thing is to understand there is no substitute for this. There is no other way to handle life. There is no other material to make life. Land, soil is the only way you make life. There is no simply another way to make life happen. If you don't mind can I tell us a little story? This happened in 2070. Hello? This happened in 2070. A few scientists sought appointment with God. They got the appointment, they went there and said, "Hey, old man, you done pretty well with creation, but everything that you can do, we can also do. It's time you retire." God said, "Oh, is that so? What is it that you can do? Give me a demo." So they took little soil, made a vague form of a human child and did all kinds of things, and the child came alive within a few minutes and cried. God said, "Well, that's very impressive, but first get your own soil. It's simply the basic of life. And unfortunately, that's not been the focus. That has to be the focus, that is the only way we'll find solution. Otherwise, we're addressing different industries. I think, let me say it, both of them have official positions, they will be diplomatic, I appreciate that. But I don't hold anything, nobody can fire me or elect me, so I can say what I want. I think largely, I wouldn't say all of it, at least 30 to 50% of climate campaigning, climate funding, climate this thing has been towards favorable industries. And people are going where there is money. People are not going towards solutions, at least 50%, I would say. It's time it shifts to soil and land because that's where the solution is. There is substantial scientific data that if you address soil revitalization, 35 to 40% of climate mitigation will happen in a very short span of time. See, we can talk about fossil fuels and getting rid of it and getting something else, I appreciate that, it has to be done, there's no question about it. That is not even a debate. We definitely have to move. But without significant technological innovations, we're not going to go, we're only going to talk. We're not going to give up our car, we're not going to give up our refrigerator, we're not going to give up the air conditioning even here. We're not going to give up, this is the way we are. So we're not going to move unless significant technological innovations happen. And technological innovation is not something that anybody can time. You can't time it. It can happen in 3 days, it may not happen in a decade. Hello? This is the way it is. Nobody can say, you give me the money, tomorrow I'll come with a solution. There is no such thing. But if you invest in land and soil, we can time the impact. We can time the impact and say in this many years, this much result will definitely happen. So, it is a far more pragmatic way to approach this whole aspect of climate change, but for me, climate change is not even the problem for me. For me, the problem is the life on this planet is vanishing. We think life means just you and me. No, without you and me, planet will flourish. Without all of them, the microbial life, the insect life, the worm life and the plant life, there is no planet. There is no question of other life happening without them. So they are vanishing, that's my concern. Your little hot or cold is not really my concern, but this may be an indicator towards that, that is fine with me. But I'm saying the focus should be how many species have disappeared. Right now they're saying by 22nd century, the beginning of 22nd century, 85% of the species on the planet are threatened, 85. You think you live all by yourself when 62% of your own body is microbial life? You think you will thrive? Right now, neurologists and microbiome scientists are clearly indicating in another 15 years' time, human software will start collapsing. I'm not talking about your phone or your computer. Your mental capabilities will start collapsing and keeping mental balance will become one of the biggest challenges in 15 years' time. In 35 to 40 years' time, your hardware will start collapsing because the microbiome is going down at a pace that you cannot imagine. So, it's time we act in the direction where we get maximum result, and that's land and soil.
Thank you very much. And as you mentioned, we need to turn our attention to land and soil. Mr. Chiao, you lead the convention, which is the voice of land in the United Nations system. How do we do that?
The voice of land in the world is here. Patricia, Sadhguru, so nice to listen to you. The world is in trouble. The world is in trouble because of the way we deal with nature and the way we interact with nature. As Sadhguru said, nature does not need us, but we destroy nature. We need it for our lives, for our livelihoods. Every year, 100 million hectares of land is degraded. That's the issue. The issue is that when governments sit down every year to approve their budgets, and the higher the budget, the more prosperous the country is. But when they sit to approve their budgets, they do not consider land and soil as part of their budget. They think that their budget is money. But actually, the wealth of a nation cannot be measured by the amount of money that is on the table today. If you continue to degrade your land and you degrade nature and to destroy the natural capital, which is the foundation of today's budget, then you can imagine the future that you will leave to your children and your grandchildren. So the yardstick that we are using today to measure the prosperity of the nations is wrong. It is measured as to how much we can extract, either oil or gold or minerals or what. It is measured as to how many trillions of dollars are on the table today. But imagine these are all finite resources. And we are 8 billion people on Earth today, moving to perhaps more. Moving to more, for sure. Maybe perhaps up to 9. So how much is available today for the unborn? And how much of their food are we eating? And how much of their wealth are we destroying? When you go to these negotiations, be it desertification or climate and so forth, you talk to diplomats or negotiators and so forth, it's all very important, but you bring back to earth. When you come back to earth, then you realize that what you are negotiating is all about life. It's not about the trillions of dollars. It's not about how many weapons that nation has. And yet, this is how we measure our power today. Our power today is measured against how much we are able to destroy ourselves, not how much we are able to build the future. So, Zenia, the discussion today is very clear and encouraging, and I would much prefer listening to them than repeating what I have been repeating every year. Our future and the future of our children and the future generations depends on how much we interact with nature. Our interaction with nature has been extraction. For centuries, we have been extracting. For centuries, we have been expanding the land that we have been using. For centuries, we have been destroying forests and wetlands and rivers, thinking that these are infinite resources. But we have come to realize that there is no colony anymore. There is no new land you can colonize anymore. We are not yet in Mars. So it is important that we actually reconsider the way we have been interacting. And when we say we, it's all of us. It is, of course, the responsibility of those who are in government, who are in power to actually adopt policies and provide us with the directions, but it is the responsibility of each and every one of us. And the way we eat, the way we interact with nature, how much food do we waste, how many clothes do we have in our closets? Do we realize that our clothes are land and water? How many T-shirts are we going to buy tomorrow if we don't need them, or we wear them only once and we discard them? And we think that we are donating. Yes, we can put it in a, just think that, yeah, this will go to another person. But actually, the second-hand clothes that we are discarding and that is being distributed from around the world is destroying nature somewhere else. And maybe competing with the textile industry that should have been developed in that country that is growing the cotton in the first place, but unable to manage. So we live in a very complex world where we actually should consider everything that we do, every single gesture that we have that may have an impact on nature. It can be measured by how much land and how much water Therefore, how much air? So the food you eat, the animal feed, the fiber you use is really what matters to us today. Thank you.
Thank you very much. All of you have actually focused on the need to change mindsets and to really refocus our attention, refocus our energies on the issue of land and soil. How can we really reach those hearts and minds in your mind? Just maybe some brief reflections, starting with Baroness Scotland, please.
Well, the thing that I am really so delighted about is that we have reached hearts and minds. The reason that I'm so proud of what we're doing in the Commonwealth is that you actually have 56 countries saying we have to change. We have to listen to nature. We have to help nature thrive. And when I was thinking, well, why is that? I think it is because we have some of the most vulnerable communities in the world in our family. We have 33 small states. 25 of them are island states. And these countries are literally dying. This isn't an existential threat for tomorrow. For them, it's an existential threat today. I'll give you an example of my own country of birth. I was born in a very beautiful island Commonwealth of Dominica, only about 72,000 people. It is rich, and it's called the Nature Island of the Caribbean. People say it's the only island that Christopher Columbus would still recognize, and that's because nothing's changed. So we have virgin forests, we've got the only boiling lake, well, two boiling lakes in the world, beautiful waterfalls, fauna, and it's the only place where the sperm whales come to regenerate. In 2015, Dominica was hit by tropical storm Erica. It destroyed 95% of the GDP. 2 years later, in 2017, Dominica was hit by the then biggest hurricane the world had ever seen, and it destroyed 226% of the GDP. But it's not the money. It's what it did to the life cycle of Dominica, which was a very precious part of our world, which still held the essence of who we are and what we are. And we still have indigenous people in Dominica. I am part indigenous Caribbean. And that culture was extremely important because our indigenous people have remained the guardians of our world. When we, with our technology, have ignored nature, have not listened to her, have not watched her, have not seen her, indigenous people around the world have, and they've been shouting at us, telling us that nature was dying, that our land was dying, and that we had to have a regenerative approach to development if we were to reverse the cataclysmic impact we were having. So what did these small islands do? And there are many, many. There's stories of all the 25 island states are similar. They were knocking on the door of the big states and saying, listen to me, help me. My culture, my people are dying, and unless you change, nothing will happen. And if we look back before the first COP, it was the Commonwealth in 1989 in Langkawi, in Malaysia, who said, if we do not stop, the existential threat that we face will be real. And I'd invite all of you to look and read that Langkawi Declaration, because it really tracked what has happened in the last 30 years. And it is perhaps one of the only place where small countries, poor countries, developing countries from the 5 regions sit around the same table as equals. And when the leaders went into retreat, they were able to say eye to eye, are you really willing for those of us round the table to die and to say goodbye to us? So in 1989, we in effect had the first IPCC and the first COP. It took the world 3 years. So why am I hopeful now? Because that Living Lands Charter isn't just a charter, it is a call to action. It's a call to action for every single one of our member states. But Sadhguru is amazing. I went to see what he is doing in India with farmers. He is reigniting the passion of farmers for the land, because our farmers have been told that they're ignorant, they're stupid. That which they have been doing for millennia is wrong. That we should use pesticides, we shouldn't have, we should only have monocrops, we shouldn't use the old traditional methods tried and tested. And what do our scientists now tell us? That our grandfathers and our great-grandfathers were right and we were wrong. So what is happening here at COP is extraordinary, because the people coming together are extraordinary. If you look around this room, we have people from every race, every region, and that's what's happening. We're waking up. And I think it's really important for us never to sleep. We can't afford to sleep, because if we sleep, we won't have a future. And I have to tell you, I thank God every day for champions like Sadhguru, for champions like Ibrahim, for the others who have been willing to say, not in our name, we will share our knowledge, our expertise, our determination, and we will change the cycle. And so be very clear, every single one of us has a role to play, and it won't happen unless we make it happen. And I'm so grateful to all of you, grateful to you, Ibrahim, and even more grateful to Sadhguru, because you touch so many lives and people listen. So I hope what all of us will do in this room is we'll understand that we are the arbiters of our future. That, as Mandela said, the impossible is only impossible until it's done. And we're going to do this.
Thank you so much for these inspirational words. Last time we had the honor of having Sadhguru at the UNCCD COP. It was in Abidjan last year, after a very epic journey on a motorcycle that was mentioned earlier, I believe in excess of 5,000 miles. So as we stand on the threshold of 2024, please correct me on the mileage there, please. As we stand on the threshold of 2024, what are some of the plans that are in store for you?
So we have, as ma'am also said, if you touch people's hearts, if you make them aware, and if no action comes forth, it will lead to enormous frustration. We're on that threshold. Substantial awareness has been done that there is a certain fatigue in people. Okay, all right, what to do? If we have to die, we will die, what to do? This is the kind of thing you hear. Because anyway you guys are not going to do anything, you go on telling us this is going to happen, that is going to happen, but what is it that's being done? No, we are still talking about it, we are still researching it, we are still working in the lab. That time is over. There is no time for simply endless conversations about the same thing. It's time for action. Action will not happen unless the governments and the businesses and every other force comes together. I'm not trying to give a commentary, but when governments and businesses meet, it is a chess game of geopolitics, it's a chess game of economic power. This has been our way, I'm not trying to comment on any particular groups of people. So if we have to go beyond this, somebody who is not an vested interest, somebody who is not against anything. I keep telling people, a whole lot of people saying, Sadhguru, we must wage a war against climate change. I said, already we have enough trouble, you want to start a war now? No, we will fight. I said, no fight. The most important thing is, as a generation, we have to come together if we want a solution. If you think you are consuming, because you're right under the lights, you're consuming more electricity than me and I'll campaign against you, you will do something against me. There's no end to this. We've done enough of this nonsense. So we need voices, we need forces which are not vested interests, they have nothing to gain from what happens or doesn't happen. Those voices must get the necessary ability to set the agenda so that… See, geopolitics and wars and fights we have had in the world are bitter memories that very few people can leave that and move on. When we start talking, those memories come back. What you did to my grandfather, I'm not forgetting it, all right? But what we are doing to our children, this is the problem. We cannot fix the injustice that we did to our fathers and grandfathers, but we need not perpetuate that injustice to the future generations. And when I say generations, I'm not talking about only human species. We must understand we are here as a unified collective life. We are not separate life, we are not an independent life. We are dependent on everything else. They are not dependent on us, we are dependent on them. They are a wealth, we are enjoying that wealth as life. I'm saying not wealth means the wealth that we have. This life itself is the greatest wealth. This wealth is a consequence of all the things that they're doing. If they stop working, if they start saying we will do only 36 hours a week, we're finished. Hello? There's a big debate about this in India right now, how many hours should we work? Human beings are talking about how many hours should we work. If the microbiome, the insects and the worms say we will work only 36 hours a week, we are finished. All right? So, it is important we understand we need to bring some comfort to them. When I say comfort, right now, because global warming seems to be the only concern, everybody is saying 1.5 degrees, 2 degrees, 2.9 degrees, whatever degrees. We do not know exactly how many degrees, but it's going up for sure, all right? If people do not know what it is about all the science and aspects of it, they just have to go and stand in the hot sun for 1 hour, then walk under the shade of a tree. They will know the difference. This is all we need to do. More land needs to come under shade, more moisture in the land, more shade, no ploughing, exposures. First 18 inches has almost 80% of the microbial life. Our machines are ploughing 12 to 14 inches deep and leaving it open for months on end. This is genocide. It is genocide of not only the organisms, it's human genocide being conducted in a future time. It is. We always think these famines and droughts will happen to some remote place in Africa, it's not our business. No, it's going to happen everywhere. We must understand right now most nations which consider themselves to have very good living standards are not producing their own food. If food is not growing where people are, you're waiting for a disaster. It just takes a little bit of upheaval that your whole apple cart will be gone. And we are not just talking about little less food or whatever. When food shortages happen, we are talking about a collapse of civilization. We will forget that we are human. Once there is food shortage on the street, we won't be human, we'll be worse than animals. Animals never do that anyway, why should we compare ourselves to such wonderful creatures? They never do anything in excess, they do only what's needed. We are the ones who are doing it, but once food shortages begin to manifest, which every UN agency has been screaming for last 2 decades, that in the next 45 years' time, there could be 40% drop in food production. If that happens, with nearly 10 billion population, oh, it's not a world I want to be in, I would like to be gone by then, really. It's not a place to live. It is definitely not a place to live who is sensitive to others' suffering. It is definitely not a place to live, and there'll be nothing much we can do once it starts manifesting. So the most important thing is, when we think of life, we shouldn't stop thinking just human life, human life, human life. We must understand only if all other lives thrive, we thrive. There is no other way. If anybody is coming up with a technological solution, let them do it, but there is no other way. I'm saying this absolutely. There is no other way, because that is the fundamental structure of life. Life is built on the tiniest life, it's built on one on top of the other. You cannot change that structure. There is no way you can do that. Because everybody keep asking, Sadhguru, is there a technological structure? Can AI find a solution for all this? For dumb things that you do, AI is not a solution. If you're doing something smart, you can extend it with artificial intelligence. You cannot solve all the dumb things that you're doing with artificial intelligence. Artificial intelligence will multiply your dumbness. It will not take it away. Hello? It will not. So this is very important that we understand, this is not about just awareness, it's time for action. If COP next 16 is coming, this COP 28 is still on the way, if you think this is the fulcrum of change, we must push for action, not going on more conversations and more conversations. Even this whole fetish for research must stop. I'm telling you, I'm not a scientist. I kept myself free of such things, consciously. I am not a scientist, I am not an environmentalist, I am not an activist. I am just as much as a worm on this planet. But I'm asking you a simple question. Do you think a worm knows more about the soil that it lives in, or a scientist knows more about it? When your life depends on it, you know what it is, all right? So I crawled on this planet for over 6.5 decades. I know what it does. I don't have to interpret this in some great scientific jargon. See, we are getting lost in our own knowledge. The burden of knowledge is just killing us, simply piling up more and more data. What will you do with it? We know this is happening. If I take a handful of soil, I know whether this is alive or it's dying. Why do you need data for this? Any farmer who lived on his land knows this. But no, their experience of thousands of years of feeding this humanity is not enough. Somebody who's done nothing except a PhD somewhere, his opinion is more important. Why? People are living on the land. They know if they take the soil in their hand, they know whether this is alive or not. Why is that not important? No, it has to come with millions of dollars of research, and some two-bit student who just got a PhD is going to come out with a solution. This has to stop. If you don't stop this, we will waste our time talking about it, looking at test tubes and conical flasks, not looking at the land, which is dying in front of our eyes.
Thank you very much for these very thought-provoking remarks. And I think there was a mention, a recurring theme again, that yes, it is time for action. So, Mr. Chair, what is your call to action to those of us here at COP28, for those of us who are following this event online, and those of us who will be also coming to COP16 in Riyadh?
So I'll be in a lot of trouble today.
Thank you. Yeah, we are all in trouble because it's live. Let me take this opportunity to say hello to all of those who are not physically in the room here, but are part of this conversation. We are here in Dubai in the Land and Drought Pavilion, and it's really fitting to have a discussion about soil. Our life, someone said, not me, depends on two things: few centimeters of soil and few millimeters of water, of rain. The problem we are having, as Sadhguru said, is that we are so clever and ingenious that we think that we should plow the land in order to increase the productivity. We think that we should throw a lot of pesticides and chemicals in order to increase the productivity. And we created green revolutions all over the world because we needed to feed more people, except in the longer term or even medium term, not long, but really what we are doing is to kill the land. So we may have increased the productivity for a few years, but on the longer term, we are actually destroying the natural capital, which is the foundation. So the few centimeters of land, of soil, are being destroyed by our own hands and our own creativity. The few millimeters of rain are actually problematic right now with all the droughts we are seeing from around the world. So in some parts of the world, we still have a little bit of soil, but there's no rain anymore. There's not enough water in the world today. And as you know, the next big war in the world will come for land and water, because there is no Cold War anymore. There is no liberation movement anymore. What is really the main concern today in terms of security is the environment, destruction of the environment, destruction of the living, climate change. This is really one of the main challenges we have today. What is our problem today is that the land that was feeding us, that is still feeding us, nourishing us, is actually going to kill us. How? When you degrade your land to the point that you see sand dunes and desert storms and the small particles that are coming back to your body and infecting your respiratory organs, then you realize that your own land is killing you. When you have such a degradation of the environment that you have dirty water instead of clean water, so the quality of the water is deteriorating. The water that you were able to drink without any treatment is now to be treated 10 times before you are able to drink it. It is an indicator that you have destroyed your environment. So in a way, we are doing things with the left hand that is really impacting us from the right-hand side. The next opportunity we have to actually have a long discussion about this, much longer than we have here today, is in 1 year from now, December 2024, COP16 of the UN Convention to Combat Desertification, which will take place in Riyadh, Saudi Arabia, to 2 weeks of discussion. But before we get to Riyadh, I want you and all of you as leaders to actually think about how we can prepare ourselves, bring farmers, pastoralists, those who produce and know the land from their hand, don't need a PhD, those who know how to produce food, how to process that food, those who actually produce the cotton and not necessarily get the value chains and all the income that is generated by the fast fashion of the world today, including those who are doing the fast fashion, they all should come to Riyadh and have a conversation. But before they get to Riyadh, please engage. Please have a conversation, and please help shape the policies that are going to be adopted by governments, because governments listen to their people. You have the weapons. The most powerful weapon that you have is your voting card. So if you are engaged, please express yourself. Okay, I'm in trouble. If you are really concerned about these issues of land and drought and how it affects us, please express yourself and get ready for COP16 in December 2024 in Riyadh. Please come, but do more than just coming. Please prepare yourself and prepare everybody else. So Sadhguru and Patricia, if I may, I really want you, respectively, through the Commonwealth, 56 nations and 2.5 billion people. Sadhguru has 4 million of them, 5 million of them following him on social media. Billion of them following on social media. Yeah, so million is. So it is important that you engage that community, prepare them, and get ready with some proposals to government before they come to COP, but while they are in COP16 as well in Riyadh. So this is how we collectively can transform the discussions to here that we have here into concrete decisions that will shape policies back at the national level. Because leaders will be invited, as they did here. So when they come, they may have some conversations, before they come, but most importantly, when they go back home, they will have more conversations, and they will probably have some conversations with those leaders who are the voting cards. The real leaders are the ones that have the voting cards. They elect people. So people that are elected are not the real leaders. The leaders are really those who put them in charge. So we have in common that possibility of shaping the agenda, of shaping policies, and certainly use the platform of the UNCCD COP. All COPs are important. 197 parties will come there. It's the whole world. It's universal. So express yourself. We all, from 197 parties, have one thing in common: the one planet. We all have one thing in common. We all live on earth, on land. We don't live on the sea. We are a terrestrial species. So we are destroying the foundation upon which we are born, we grow up with, and probably we will return when we die. We don't know when it will happen. But before we go, please think about our children and our grandchildren and what we are going to leave behind for them. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chow. And on this note, I believe really it is some other parting words.
No, I just want to say that the Commonwealth Living Lands Charter is a call to action. We've just issued the framework. That framework, which is participating the 3 Rio Conventions, provides policies and implementation strategies. So please look at it, join us, and be part of the call for living lands. That's one. The second is to say, just to reassure Sadhguru, that what's amazing is that the good researchers and scientists are now listening to nature and to farmers, and surprise, surprise, they are getting the empirical data to tell us that everything our grandparents and our great-great-great-great-grandparents was right, and that what we've been doing was probably wrong. So now we can just implement what nature has told us we need to do, and that is to provide a regenerative approach to development, which will save soil, which is Sadhguru's call, save nature, and in doing so, we will save ourselves. Thank you.
I did mention this in COP15 at Cote d'Ivoire also. One So, one important thing that I mentioned there also, but it is in the nature of the organizations and the governmental structures that we have created, that policies tend to get so mired in language and data that we must first of all understand, doesn't matter, I'm not against the scientists can produce as much data as they can, the academics can write things about it, make many theories about it, but when it comes to implementation, it can only be implemented by the farmer. So if it has to be implemented at the farm level, the most important thing is, it must be simple, one-pointed and incentive-based. If we don't do this, we will be talking and talking for centuries to come if we live that long.
Thank you very much. And for these inspiring words, another quick comment, Mr. Chair?
Just to thank very much Sadhguru and Patricia Scotland for this wonderful conversation, to thank you for your leadership and to thank you for the vision you are giving to many. You know, I know you are both very humble, but the impact you are having in the world today and the vision that you are sharing with the rest of the world, not only in this room, but the other people that are following us on live, but more importantly even on YouTube later on, to think that the leadership you are providing us today is really seeds for tomorrow. It is land, soil is not dirt. Land, soil is not only worms, but it is important that we all consider how we should contribute to managing this. So thank you very much for your participation. Thank you for your leadership. Please join me, join Zenia, all of us, join your hands in thanking the leadership here. Thank you.